Hello and welcome everybody to the Chief Architect Network Live. You've actually got about 50 architects in the room here, chief architects across the Fortune 500. And I wanted to start with a bit of a conversation with my friend Philip Bell. So Philip is one of the founders of Sofa Summits and SwitchOn, and he has been running these internet events for architects for a long time. Philip, maybe tell people about what Sofa Summits is.
Okay, well, thanks for the intro and thanks for the invite today as well, Grant. So Sofa Summits is, we're an events company. We like to build communities across a variety of different topic areas. We have two main brands that we operate. So we have our SwitchOn brand, which focuses on all things enterprise architecture related. And that's why we're here today. And that's how we connected with Grant. I think you spoke at one of our first events in 2021 for Americas. And then we've been kind of working together since, and then since Grant launched Can, we've been working very closely together on a sporting partnership with that. We also have another brand which we operate here in Europe, which is called Data Next, which focuses on a variety of different data topics. So that event is kind of more for the data community. But what we're seeing is there's quite a lot of crossover between those nowadays. So yeah, that's just a kind of a very brief intro in terms of us and who we are. But yeah, very happy to join and yeah, was very happy to be invited by Grant to be in partnership for this panel discussion.
Amazing. So I'll also tell you a little bit about the Chief Architect Network if you haven't heard of that group before. So what we are is a group of Fortune 500 chief architects. And our really vision is around maximizing the value of architecture practices through a network that widens perspectives, shares best practices, grows us as leaders, and develops our talent and drives outcomes. So we're doing that today, right? We're doing all those things today. So I'm really excited about today's conversation. I'm going to pivot us over to a little bit of a different format here. I'll find it. It's in there somewhere. Nope, that's not it. Okay, well, give me a moment here. And I'm going to bring my colleagues onto the stage with us and actually introduce you to the room as well. So pardon me, it was working a moment ago. So that's closer. I'll just take the time to get it sorted. There we are. Okay, that's what I was looking for. So I'd like to introduce Randy and Rameshwar, and I think we also have Anthony Sneed, and you're in this one, Martin. Hop up front. So our moderator today is Rameshwar. Do you got a microphone over there? Yes, it does. Wonderful. So without any further ado, he's going to be running today's conversation. I'm going to sit over here. I'm going to be clicking on your comments as they come in on LinkedIn and featuring them and actually offering them up to Rameshwar to share them with the panel. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Rameshwar, take us away.
Thanks, Grant, and thanks, Philip. Good to see you virtually. So again, in Texas, we say howdy, Texas. That's our norm. So make sure you all say howdy, Texas.
Howdy, Texas.
Thank you.
Howdy, Texas.
So we have a wonderful panelist today, Randy. Yep, there you go. Way to go. And then we have Randy, we have Tony, and Martin, who's succeeding Tony over here. So kudos and congrats to you, Martin. Thank you. So it's a wonderful topic. And let's start with Randy, because Randy does more into consulting and all. How do you see and how do you define the intersection of enterprise architecture and security?
And security. Well, I mean, obviously, as we're architecting our solutions, security has to be built in. So I'm working with the largest hospital agency in the country right now, and security is one of their biggest concerns with HIPAA and PII and all of the information that goes around and PCI. So they've got every acronym you can think of, but that's always at the forefront of their mind. They also have another big challenge, which is around data. They have one of the largest data sets you can imagine because of all the imaging. Like if you think of, when you go to get a scan, for whatever ails you, all of that imaging has to be stored and available, and it has to be archived for years. So all of that, though, requires special attention to security. And I think right now is a very interesting time for architects especially in this agentic AI area, because I think that's going to be the next real big challenge.
That's great, Randy. So, around 14 years back, the earliest hypervisors, which is AWS, probably 2010, 2009, had three principles. I don't know how many of you remember: secure, scalable, and sustainable. Secure by design. So cloud was fundamentally started with the concept of secure by design. So if you had been having for the last 15 years or close to 16 years, why now even more? Why is this pressure to have security at the forefront when AWS already said 16 years back?
I think there's a natural challenge with respect to security and data, because the goal with data, of course, is to pull it forward and use it in more places, right? Because that's where the value is, right? There's no value in data just sitting in a silo, not being tapped by anything, right? But at the same time, of course, our goal is to try to secure how that data gets tapped and where it ends up, however long it ends up, in order to actually be valuable. So I think that, one of the, when Randy was speaking about EA and their role within security, one of the interesting things that came to mind for me was just what a threat vector it is for like hospitals or places that have to retain that data for so long, and how they design these solutions at a point in time, right? This is the state of the industry, the state of technology, and we're going to design solutions that are secure by design at that time. But somehow magically, we need to also somehow keep an eye on what's out there and evolving. This whole agentic AI thing was not a thing 10, 15 years ago. And somehow we've got to adapt and deal with it, because we can't just automatically redesign our solutions every 6 months or every 3 months, right? And so that, I think that's kind of the biggest challenge that we're dealing with respect to EA and security.
Yeah, and at Hilti, one thing that really helped make a difference for us was a couple of things. One is, first of all, starting with awareness, right? And increasing that level of awareness at all levels of the organization. And we have, a compliance month. I think this month, September, is our compliance month at Hilti, where we go through the training and watch all the videos. And some of them are somewhat entertaining, finding the USB drive on the floor, near the printer, and understanding how dangerous that is, that kind of thing. The other thing is training at all levels as well has made a difference. But when it really comes down to it, I think the key differentiator for us there is automation, right? Things like Veracode, things that go through our systems that actually check for those vulnerabilities on an automated basis, and having that be an ongoing thing with every code check-in, all of our DevOps processes and things of that sort, to being able to spot those kinds of things, because humans tend to sometimes take the shortcut, the easiest road, or just out of ignorance. And so where you find gaps in those other areas, we really rely on that automated piece to help close the gaps.
We need human in the loop, but with AI governance and AI acceleration. So it's interesting. So Randy, back to you. Cybersecurity and enterprise architecture have a T and an I shape, a dotted line. How can the chief architect, not confront, but collaborate with CISO and make security as core to enterprise architecture?
Well, I think the first thing is, you said it in your statement, which is the collaboration. So it definitely has to be a collaboration with the CISO suite, right? And you think about how you architect things and how you take things to the ARB, to the review board, and the security reviews that have to preempt that. I think the key for enterprise architecture is getting in with the business as early as possible to help shape the solution and understand the risks before they start thinking about, which tool am I going to buy, or which application am I going to buy? How am I going to build it? What are going to be the components? The earlier we can get in on the business conversation, the quicker we can also shape the outcome and be able to track the ROI for that, because that's a big thing that doesn't happen today, is we do a good job of creating an ROI vision for the future to get things approved, and nobody tracks the realization, right? Or few do, and maybe you do on really big projects. But I think the most important thing is collaboration with the CISO suite and the business, and really understanding what is it the business is really trying to accomplish, and helping them do that, and bringing security into that as early as possible, because frequently security is even further behind than the architects in terms of consideration, frequently, until you get to the review board, and then there's suddenly a gate, and you become a barrier, or the CISO suite becomes a barrier, and you don't want that to happen.
That's good. We actually bought security and architecture at the beginning of the gate itself. Right.
So I completely agree, 150%. We need to get them shift left and get closer to the business on their decision making from the start on the technology acquisition, right? Now I'm curious though, on the other side of that coin, which is the implementation piece as well, right? So the getting as close to the developers is probably the biggest challenge for chief architects, is to stay connected both on the business side or penetrating that more while also staying in touch with what developers are doing, right? I mean, to give you an example, I was talking with a dev team recently that did not understand that database encryption at rest, it should be the default, should be the norm, right? And they were like, well, we never got that memo. And I was left speechless when I heard that, right? And I'm like, actually, I'm pretty sure, and they're using AWS, and I'm like, actually, I'm pretty sure this is the default. So like, if you actually try to set something up with Terraform or whatever, that you would actually see that as somebody had to go through extra effort to turn it off, right? And that's at the moment where I'm like, oh man, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? Like just shifting left and focusing on the CISO and the C-suite, only to find this, right?
You brought an interesting point. We have this very similar thing where the developers in the journey is, you didn't tell us the rules. The rules are already there. So part of the architecture is we send the rules up front. This is part of your governance. You miss this checklist, you're not going to go through gates. But Tony.
Yeah, and actually, even returning to a point that Randy made earlier about the gate check, being an important component of that, and how do you manage that in a way that it's less obstructive, shall we say, or less perceived as being obstructive, but really being as constructive. And the other thing I like to also go around to is just training and enablement of our architects as well, because we're chief architects, right? So we have architecture practices, we have architecture teams. How well do we actually incorporate the security piece in the training of our team members, in how we operate every day, in the review process that we have? And I know at the corporate level, they've done a pretty good job of bringing security and architecture review together as well. And what we've been working on at the local level is in our business unit divisions is to replicate that in a sense. And that also goes back to establishing standards, right? And making those easily accessible to your team members, so they don't have to wonder, where do I find this piece of information that tells me how to do my job, right? But really, and I think it's a cultural question as well, in terms of cultural awareness and constant reinforcement and iterating on that.
That's great, Tony, because when we hear culture, I've heard it enough. Culture, it's strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, but culture really means people. Perhaps we as chief architects, if we can evangelize or inspire people, that's where part of the culture stands. It's not an easy thing, but it's a dogmatic thing. So the easy questions are over, but now comes the fun, serious questions. So, okay, thank you. I was making sure. So, the problem with this AI is, I was just reading with Gartner and the Forrester, is AI, the market is around 400 billion. Don't quote me, but that's what ChatGPT or whatever say. And by 2030, it's about $1.5 trillion. Cybersecurity, on the other hand, any guess? What's the market cap? It's around 10.5 trillion already, which is almost like a 15-20x right now. So the question that I want to ask the panelists is, cybersecurity has gone very complex. It's just not about the breaches, but understanding the risk quantification and insurance. How are you guys translating your outcomes to effective risk strategies? And how are you working with your cyber insurance? 3 topics, very complex. Randy?
I know I always have to start. No, it's okay. It's okay.
I even gave Brian a chance, and he was like, no, we're going to go to Randy first.
Okay, let's make Randy over there.
So I think I think on the cyber side, I really do think that there's some additional new challenges on the AI front. Think of AI or agentic AI as an application. You have to do all the standard tests and validation of the application. But with AI, it brings some new challenges, right? You've got data leakage both on the input and the output. So you have to test for that. You have to validate for that. You've got, instead of SQL injection, which we all ran into in the 90s, now you've got prompt injection. And so how do you prevent prompt injection? You've got to do validation on all of your inputs, but you also have to do validation on the way back out as well, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do to get ahead of those. But I think that all of those, there will need to be a closer working relationship than there has been in the past between architects and security, because just one bad problem in this space that could cripple an organization. I mean, it is really out there and really bad. And if we get, I think we'll have time, but I do have one other nugget that is important on the AI front, but also on the cryptography point that we'll save for the later, keep everybody interested.
You now made me ask questions on quantum now.
You know, I love what you said about prompt injection and the data leakage, and these are new things that we need to look at in terms of AI and hardening it, right, for a secure by design approach for using AI, especially in large corporate enterprises. I think the thought that kind of comes to my head is the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Because at the end of the day, that's still user input and then data output from the application, right? And we have to figure out how to harden it. And so the what kind of stays the same, but I think the how is what gets interesting, right? Because we're now looking at, if you look at agentic AI or AI in general, there's the first loop of building the model itself, right? And then that's a cache of data that could be very valuable if it somehow walked away to some malicious user's hands, right? And then, of course, you know, we're focusing on the use of that AI model in real time in enterprises. And also we have the shadow IT component, right? You know, people want to use their own special AI model that they think is better than whatever the corporate overlords want to specify for their use, right? So I think it's interesting to kind of look back and go, yeah, I can see the cybersecurity landscape of this has changed a little bit, but also it's like it's you know, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, right? Is the way I kind of think about it.
Yeah, and I'll just close it out here as well with saying that I really like your question, Rameshwar, because as chief architects, we interface not only with the technology side, but also with the business side, right? And then how do we help the business and empower and give them the capability to be able to make the right kind of business decisions with respect to security? Because it's always a trade-off, right? It's always evaluating the risk, which we generally always underestimate, right? And how do you quantify that in a way that justifies the investment that's required? And then how do you help the guide the business in terms of what's the best use of those dollars? How do you actually strategically spend those dollars to be able to get the most benefit that's going to help you mitigate that risk in the correct fashion? So that's a challenge we all face as chief architects, is that being that sort of that in-between place between the business and the technology.
You know, one thing I'm realizing times a year, right? And security often comes up. So I'm curious if we could ask you a question. What do you see in this space as kind of the emerging and continuing trends across the different conversations at SwitchOn? Oh, we got you on mute. Here, I'll take you off if I can.
Sorry, my bad. There was some noise going on in my neighbour's house. They're doing some some renovations, so I'd muted myself. Yeah, what we've seen, the relevance of security just continue to grow, I think, over the course of the last 18 to 24 months. With the rise of AI, the risks around security, we just see kind of continuing to grow. So it's an area that maybe, yeah, like 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't pay so much attention to at our SwitchOn events, but we've actually had quite a few requests from attendees saying, okay, can you maybe focus a little bit more on the security side of things, have a few more sessions that are focused on this area? And as kind of what we like to think, custodians of our community. You know, we always like to listen to people and then kind of bring those things onto the agenda as they become more and more relevant. It's one of the kind of key things that we like to think we need to do in order to kind of keep our finger on the pulse to keep delivering a really nice experience for everyone. So yeah, everything that your panel have mentioned here really resonates with what we've been hearing across our events for the last, couple of years, I would say. So.
Very cool. Back to you, Rameshwar.
Thanks, Grant, and thanks, Philip. By the way, I think it's time. I feel personally I've been quite invested into cybersecurity. I think we as chief architects need to spend a lot more time on cyber risk quantification and cyber insurance, because cyber risk quantification is not just math, it's a science. And given how the state of AI is, there's a lot that we all have to work towards it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, please, especially since we're streaming. Here you go.
Lori and Pratt. So same as the old boss, but the new boss is like the Terminator, man. and the hype is unprecedented. And I see you guys as the realists, right? You're the ones who have to eat that dog food in the implications that the AI, especially agentic hype, has on security. And I guess the way I see it is like agentic is galloping forward. How is it going, guys, in making sure that the security controls and the risk management controls stay ahead of the AI implementations and shadow IT? Oh my goodness. I'd love to hear, best practices and how are you still standing? Because it must be a really hard job.
It is. No, I'll probably ask you, Tony. Or do you want me to go ahead?
Go ahead.
So, actually, a good friend of mine, and actually this is, I keep telling this and I'll tell everyone. Enterprises are deterministic, AI is probabilistic. The pace at which AI is going and the rules are not able to keep up with it. But what we can do is, I just had a conversation today morning. We had data governance, and we have controls, GDPR, CCIP, and all. But if you talk of AI governance, the rules and the regulations are so fluid. It's coming by state, by county, or whatnot. Texas is a little bit different. We have for all the ones together. The pace is going so fast. The rules aren't coming, and the software that's coming is also not there. And in fact, what is happening is we are having silos. We are having AI governance tools. I was just with Credit.ai. If you haven't met them, the first question I asked is, when do you talk to data governance team? When do you talk to enterprise governance team? When a model hits a bias that causes a regulation, whom are you going to report? The bias was caused due to a data drift. Are you not reporting to the data governance team? And then because it caused a legal ramification for you, it should be for it. So long story short, I don't think we have the answers yet, but we as chief architects, we need to put sound places in board. Even in our company, we have multiple governance teams. Where do we do the handshakes? Where do we coordinate? It's a simple thing is, when do we use an RPA versus an agent? To me, sometimes some of the tasks that I use, so if you see the definitions of agentic AI, I don't want to steal their thunder. They say it's what? Autonomous to semi-autonomous. So autonomous means to me is a Tesla on a Copilot driving a business process by itself. But if you see, the agentic automation is being done at an activity level. If it's an activity level, it's an RPA to me, RPA 2.0, no offense. But this is what we as chief architects have to do. The regulations are still immature, but what we can do is the controls, what we know is what we are doing. But part of that is we are increasingly looking at security posture management. At least we need to understand where is our data, where is our infrastructure. It is helping us to be in compliance or not. So that is where we are in the journey. But Tony and Randy, I made sure I'm here this side.
And I'm going to pass it off to Mark right away.
And when you guys are ready, I got a question from the audience too.
Okay.
So go for this one first.
And one of the reasons I'm going to work together with Martin on this, because we both work for Hilti, and I'm actually moving on, and he's taking my role, and essentially it's I think with agentic AI, I think we're still in baby land. I think we're just AI in general has been so chaotic a disruption that we're really kind of step by step. Now we do have these hackathons, so we get people excited about things and they try different things, but then when it comes time to productizing those, there's that whole process, and we mentioned before the governance process with respect to the architecture and security curator review. So those same processes apply to the AI as part of the solution. So that's one way we deal with it. But I think with respect, especially to your question and agentic AI, I really kind of see a wait and see approach. I just pass that on to you.
Absolutely. And you mentioned best practices, and I don't know if this is a best practice, but I'll say that from my side, the only thing that I feel comfortable with so far is to mandate a certain level of training on how to use AI, and then also exclusion, right? So you can't use AI unless you have gone through some sort of training on prompt engineering, just because I understand the risk of, a very junior individual putting confidential information into a prompt, right? That's just inappropriate, right? Versus somebody that will engineer a prompt to intentionally be vague about details that aren't necessary or relevant to the prompt, what you're actually trying to get out of the AI model, right? You can simulate, you can put synthetic information about your scenario and just be vague, right? I'm in this industry, for example. I'm not at Hilti, as an example, right? In order to sort of protect yourself, and then also providing acceptance criteria to the prompt itself, and saying, when you provide this information or your recommendations, I want you to be specific about what caused you to make this recommendation, what data, or what can you cite specifically, or to be able to put guardrails and say, only use data that is in this article or in this packet of information. Do not use anything outside of it. Do not get creative. Do not get imaginative, right? But unfortunately, that is still me trusting the application, trusting the bot, right? I wish that we had better tools. And so that's why I'm actually interested in some of the stuff we've already seen from Nudazik, and also from, perhaps some other vendors as well, on how we can set up some sort of secondary review loop, right? And then finally, the only other best practice I think we are aware of now is just making sure that wherever AI is playing, we still have human loops around that they will always be the firewall. And what I remember from my time in the healthcare industry that I really, really, really left with was, I was working on software that worked on clinical machines. It pulled data from blood pressure cuffs, from ventilation machines, etc. And a part of our software would issue prescriptions, or it would display prescriptions for nurses to go and pull, and then go and administer to their patient, whatever. And there was a defect in one of our releases that showed a lethal dose of pentobarbital. All right. Now, it didn't go anywhere. And the reason why is because our nursing staff were trained to say, listen, when it comes to operating the software in these machines, this is phenomenal stuff. It's going to save you time. It's very efficient, and it's going to do a lot of thinking for you. But at the end of the day, you are the professional, not the computer. And the responsibility stops with you. And so you always need to double check in your head anything the computer tells you to do. You can't just say, I did this because the machine told me so, right? And that's the stopgap, the firewall that I hope will be helpful and effective when we, talk about Terminator coming for our jobs or whatever, right?
All right. Kind of going back a little bit more toward your question, and maybe I'm not saying this is the solution, but it goes back to a lot of what Tony said. So this is an internal document that we have. It's called Gen AI Reference Architecture, Risks and Suggested Mitigations. Now, the interesting part is it covers some good general stuff, some good general steps, et cetera, but then it breaks down a lot of these risks, like I talked about, data leakage, prompt injection, et cetera. And then it breaks it down into, what do you do as a provider, a developer, right, an engineer, et cetera, and what do you do as a user? Because they're two totally different perspectives. Lots more on the provider than the user in most cases, but both have to be aware. And I think that kind of thing. We did this, our chief architect did this in conjunction with our CISO office in North America. And so we came out with that, we published that, and that goes out to all of our development staff and everybody as a user. So I think that's the kind of thing that you have to do to get ahead of it. And it makes things like testing, requires them to be much more rigorous, and you have to really think out of the box. And I don't think you're going to be able to do a proper job of testing it without actually leveraging AI, because you just not enough human to do it.
So before we bounce around, I wanted to share that we've got some questions coming from outside and from online. And also, we've got a room full of chief architects here. It's pretty impressive. In fact, I don't think we did name rank serial number, but we probably don't have time for it. So we'll just instead say there's big companies and their technology leaders really represented in the room today. So what questions you might have, it's a rare opportunity. We've got about 15 minutes left for those online to take advantage of both the people at the front of the room, but this microphone travels, right? We can bring it anywhere in this room. So really curious also what the room has to ask and how that can drive conversation. So first, let's go to the ones that came in online. A comment from Yeshar was that culture does not solely mean people. It also means the behavior of the people, and that can construct the fuel, and that can construct your fuel process. Totally agree with that. And Anthony jumped in with a question that I'll actually feature out here online. Oh, sorry, I clicked the wrong one, Anthony. He asked, are the architecture organizations out there maintaining enterprise-wide data models? Are they incorporating CIA, PIA, PHI, PCI indicators? Interesting conversation, because if they weren't for security architects and data architects, we wouldn't have formal methods. Do people think that AI changes the need for both data and security models? Well, I have an opinion on that. No, the how is changing, not the what. But what do you guys think?
So the traditional way of classifying the data, yes, we do have enterprise data models, which is the needed, but the problem is they're static. You need real-time visibility. That comes part of the data observability and observability. That is part of the challenge. That's a new investment that everybody's going. The bigger thing I kind of briefly touched is traditionally we were only focused on structured data. Now it's unstructured data at zettabyte scale. We don't even know. I don't even know, even though it's live streaming. Each one of you, if you can put your hand and say, how well and how comfortable are you with, do you know all the data that's around your environments? And I don't even know if there's a right answer.
It's just, if you move out of the way, people can see. Raise your hand. No one can really see you online. You'll just be blurs. Like, So what was the question again, Rameshwar?
Who has complete control and visibility into their data? Oh, that's great. That's company data. That's a good one. I can even guarantee your personal data is with the.
You know what you know. So what you have visibility is what you think.
Think is said.
I love that, Geeta. So Geeta said, for the folks online, that you know what you know based on what you have visibility to. So that's what you think you know.
Sakim had a good question. Define visibility. Everybody in today's world has hybrid cloud, including on-prem. Do you know every nook and corner of your cloud and your on-prem? Do you have visibility into what data, which data, and how it is stored, and what kind of access controls they have? Production data is in non-prod is in production. Somebody from dev access production, somehow sneakily, and somebody you talked of data at encryption and rest. Oh, we just cloned it, but we masked it, but it's not masked fully.
Maybe a better question when we're not broadcasting online.
Yeah. So that's why I said, maybe we should. So this is what we are seeing. And part of that is, and when we get people to the gates, the standard way and the traditional way is we have the regex way of tools, the cataloging, and, people inadvertently or advertently classify data. So we classify it and it goes to the data governance checklist. But what we are finding is that is no more relevant because of the amount of the data it is. So we are we've actually introduced a security posture management tool, which actually looks around and classifies. So AI is actually accelerating new breed of tools and technologies to help us. So while AI, and I agree with Tony and everyone else, we are at the beginning of it, but just like we have ChatGPT, we have Worm GPT, we have Spam GPT. So why not use AI to help us to do this? So use AI to fight AI. That is how we are trying to do that. But again, we are at the beginning of an AI era. Tony.
Yeah, I just agree with that. The tools that we are now coming into the playground, into the foreground of being able to intelligently analyze data, that we need to use to be able to further our objectives in the security realm as well.
Indeed. And I refuse to believe anybody has full visibility on their data. I think that's the funny. Yeah, it's a debatable thing. Even LLMs can only grasp so much as well. So, but I do agree that AI tools are probably our only. This is getting really close to that Sarah Connor moment. But I really do feel like our only chance to scale in some sort of review and human loop governance over what AI is producing is with AI tools. It's unfortunate because it kind of feels like a violation of the maker checker rule, the 4I principle, this whole, making sure that you have some sort of way to say that I have validated that the data that came out of it is legitimate without actually going through and checking every single record. But unfortunately, it really is the only way that we're going to actually make sure that what AI is producing is not all complete hallucinations, or at least mitigating the impact of hallucinations in our data set.
I think the only thing I'll add is that going back to the visibility question, I think with things that have come online probably in the last few years where you can have rigorous governance and data tagging, and tagging of your assets and tracking all of those, that's the easy stuff, right? You can put governance in place where it just doesn't go into production unless it's been fully tagged and you know what it is, and you have a good governance process around that. The problem is the legacy stuff. And finding that, that's just millions and millions of lines of code that, in some cases nobody's touched in 10 years. So that part there is the challenge. And I think that's the part where, going back to what's already been said, is that it's going to take AI to kind of figure those things out.
We got another question online. Agentic AI is arriving in highly regulated spaces like healthcare and finance. This is from John McMichael. From your vantage point, will on-premise organizations adopt these systems at scale, or will risk compliance and legacy investments keep most of them off on the sidelines? What conditions would tip the balance? And then I'd love to pivot to the room and see what the folks here have as questions.
I don't know if you've seen Grant. I made sure there's no bias. So now this question is with
oh my God.
Balance of weights.
All right. So again, help me with the question again.
Okay. So the question is, agentic AI is arriving in highly regulated spaces, right? So is it going to be the concerns around compliance, maybe legacy constraints, risk tolerance, scale concerns, or, that'll keep it on the sidelines, or what things would tip the balance? Tried my best there, Michael, or John McMichael, to do your question justice.
I think the big constraint is going to be the scalability of infrastructure and costs. We already see how expensive AI is to operate, and that's thinking about all the future, use cases that we want to have with the data that we're getting today in our businesses. I don't think legacy risks are going to be the thing that tips the scale. I really do think that the challenge that we're going to have is how do we capture the data that's being generated in our business and ingest that in a responsible way to get value out of the AI bots without paying out the nose for junk, right? Junk, spam GPT, right? As an example. So I think that at the end of the day, the most important metric that we're all going to want to pay attention to is how much energy of our energy industry is going towards AI. I'm looking at all the data centers that are going up, right, and the deals that are being struck between GPT and other companies, because I feel like that's really going to be our limiting factor in terms of where we actually want to point the AI gun and extract value, to the detriment of other potential use cases that are available out there.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges that we have is we're talking about AI and Gen AI, and we're kind of fixated on that just because of the times. But there are other big problems out there from a cyber perspective. So if you're not protecting your data from quantum cryptography or decryption, that's a mistake, and that's something you need to address, because people can be siphoning off your data today and you don't even know it. They can't crack it yet, but there have been at least one known case of a Chinese company that used their quantum computing capability to crack an uncrackable code. So that kind of stuff is coming too. It's not just about the AI, but I think, again, the AI can be an assistant to help with that as well. So
our next question is going to come up from Boris. I'll give one. It looks like you're about to share something, Martin. Go right ahead.
I was going to say, in response to that, fully agree. And, I assume that anything that can be cracked and will be cracked, and we need to focus on like how do we prevent it from getting in the wrong hands to begin with, because the truth is we're finding out that decades past, you know, intelligence agencies are really good at secretly cracking things and not really sharing, right?
Can we go with the next question?
Yes.
So if we think about cybersecurity historically, it was largely a retrospective type of activity, meaning that bad events happen and then we scramble with hair on fire, for those who have hair, trying to figure out how to respond and what to do next. Related phenomena is that AI is not a static application. It's not an application that you can install and it behaves the way it is. All prompts, all interactions, AI inherently is based on evolving model, where weights evolve, attention evolves, the model itself evolves, how it responds evolves. My question is, how can we connect these two dots to preempt whack-a-mole game, to get ahead of emerging threats, because bad actors are going to leverage these emerging capabilities ahead of us unless we do something about it. What can be done?
World peace, let's go.
Yeah. So I think that proactively, the cybersecurity side of software development is just now catching on to things like an SBOM, right? Software bill of materials. And there are some techniques and tips in there that we should probably be applying to AI as well. So for example, you know, when you say that AI is somehow fundamentally different, going back to what I said before, I don't see it as different. To me, it's still an application. Somebody wrote code. It takes in data and it responds to that data and it somehow gets smarter. But really, all it's doing is just getting more data and then you know running through the same algorithms, the same functions, and coming up with a slightly different response or a slightly better response. Right. The challenge is the data itself and where it's coming from, right? So I think that the one of the first things that I would probably suggest for the industry for AI models is somehow being able to secure your supply chain of data. All right, here's the data that went into the model, and here's how we can prove that no extraneous data went into this model. So, you know, I think that would be very helpful for the healthcare industries, for example, to know that this data did not require any PI data, or the model doesn't have any PI data to start with. So the risk of hallucination and generating some unknown social security number or whatever is minimal, right? And then going into prompt engineering, of course, and training in order to address more, you know, user level, you know, AI concerns.
Got a question here in the back, and we're actually going to be out of time in a moment, so maybe we'll do a lightning round. We'll do one question, yeah. one of you answers, and last question, one of you answers, then we'll wrap. Okay, go ahead.
It's not exactly a question, but the comment in terms of interest of the entire group. I came across a company in Israel that's actually working on shifting the mindset. Like we always thought of design, preparing these ivory towers, shifting left, right? We're always trying to, but with human behavior, that's not typically works, right? The next thought process is shift right, security shifting right, looking at from offensive side that has become smarter with AI adoption and the same tools they're getting in their hands as well. So the shifting right is where you monitor actively and start going back. Like it's as you saw, the legacy debt is too high to fix it, right? So look at from what's getting unsecured, what's getting hacked or tracked, right? Make sure those get monitored, come back and have the tools, AI tools that actually goes back. Like as you mentioned, the security posture tool doing that. So, but that's in a real world attacks. Like we see something getting attacked rather than just relying on the existing security tool, look at the AI model. So I came across this Israeli company that's really interesting. I came across earlier this year. They are kind of changing this mindset, shifting right and making sure we are prepared for that. People are going to do mistakes. It's a human behavior problem. Like in your example, you saw even though rules are there, someone went back, right? And it just slipped out of like everyone's eye, and now it becomes a problem until it cripples down on audit and company itself, right? So rather than that, have the tool in a place which actually shift right and continuously monitor in a way that AI can be helpful. So that's another kind of a mindset I came across out of that meeting when I actually walked out of that company's conference, right? It's really good tool. I'll share the name. Like, I'm not selling the tool, but I definitely share the name with the group in particular interest. But that's really tool that kind of made me. I work in cybersecurity AI data, but that made me think differently, right? So definitely look at that angle of a security as well.
Since that was more of a comment, we're going to go to Dr. Lorian for our last question.
Following on from what you said, Randy, I wonder if data governance is going to lead to higher level governance like model governance or decision governance, or the assets we create based on that data. Do you see any movement in that direction?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so if you're using small LMs, large LMs, whatever the case, you should have governance over those already. I mean, so the fact that you want to have that governance is there, and I do think we need. So AI helps us do the little things faster and better, right? It frees us up to do the bigger things we should have been doing before, but we just didn't have time to. So that higher level data governance and being able to track decisions, and not just decisions, but the implications of those decisions over time. And when does it change, and when do I need to re-review that decision? And so things for like your decision board, your RAID logs and things like that, you can take this to any level. But I think that's a really great point.
Well, we're right at time. Why don't we give you guys a moment just to share your final takeaways?
Okay. Now, I think one of the things I'll go back to is something that Nathan said earlier is, and it came up in a question, which was really about, how good is this going to be? Is it real? And all that kind of stuff like that. It's real when you have a business outcome. When you have an outcome that's going to produce something on the top line or the bottom line, and it's very traceable, then that's real. And that's when the business is going to leave us behind unless we're, attached to them at the hip. So I do think that that's going to happen. One of the things that Nathan showed was the percentage improvement in productivity across a number of different areas between 50 and 80%. And I know in my business, we're seeing something similar. A little cautious on the 80%, but some things like 50%. And we're having to change our financials. Not historically, but going forward, we're changing our estimating models. We're changing how we think about it, and we're putting it into contracts. And that's, and everybody should be thinking about that.
Absolutely agree. And I think one of the things I saw recently was an article about how businesses are changing their financial outlook models based on AI, right? Where we have these shortcuts that we want to bake into our estimates so we can compete with our competitors, et cetera. And they found that it's an interesting gamble because, of course, it's all about how we use AI, the different users, right? I mentioned how there are users who, quite frankly, I've seen developers that say AI is garbage, I don't use it, right? And of course, we've all seen people say, oh, AI is amazing for my code base, my applications, my architecture, whatever, and it's a game changer, and it's made me a 100x engineer, whatever, right? And of course, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? And so, going back to to corporate, financial models, it's really interesting to see different companies and their clients respond to AI as, hey, is this something that I can expect, a cheaper estimate from my vendors going forward? Or how should I expect AI to change my costs going out to my vendors or professional services going forward? But then also balancing that against all the conversation we've had today about the risks and the challenges with hallucinations or with potential cybersecurity, or as I mentioned earlier, the dollars per watts that go into actually keeping the lights on for AI, right? Because there's a definite ceiling that we're marching towards, and we can't just let AI go into a recursive infinite loop that brings down our entire energy grid, right?
And I'll just share from the experience that I have at Hilti, when we looked at AI and what are the use cases and what are the areas we want to invest in. What we realized, one of the things we realized is that we're still, in a lot of ways, at least in our business unit, not quite at a place where we're able to fully leverage what AI has to offer, because we have some homework to do in these other areas, specifically data architecture, data classification, and security. And it sort of reminds me of a quote by Warren Buffett, and I'm paraphrasing here, is when the tide goes out, you see who's wearing a bathing suit, right? Right. So AI is sort of this tide that's going out, and then we realize, oh, we've got a lot of deficiencies, and we've got to go back and do our homework in shoring up these areas from a security perspective.
I'll wrap the session with a bold statement. All the enterprises out over here were ready for the SaaS era, not for AI era. We're not made for a memory-based era, which Boris is asking about. With that saying, thanks to the wonderful panelists, you guys, I made sure you all have equanimity and there's no equal bias over it. Thank you so much.
All right. I'd like to also thank our colleague, Philip Bell, for making this entire platform available and globalizing the voice of architects. We kind of you got to be on with us to expand the voice of architecture across industry. If you wouldn't mind, just make a quick plug for the upcoming SwitchOn events. We've got Americas and a few others on the horizon.
Yes, so the next SwitchOn event will be SwitchOn Americas, which is on October 30th. So you can check that out, switchonconf.com, and then you can find a full list of all the ones that we have lined up. The one after that will be our Women in Architecture Americas event, and then we have our APAC edition of the event, which is on December 4th. And then right at the end of the year, we're going to have a best of, where we're selecting the top 20 presentations across the whole of the year. We'll be making that available for free on the platform as well. So yeah, just check out the website, and feel free to reach out to myself either on LinkedIn or other channels. And yeah, it'd be great to continue the conversation. But thank you, Grant, for everything you do with the Chief Architect Network and for the continued partnership that we have together.
Amazing. We love it. And always come to the SwitchOn events, because that's where you'll find members of this group joining and speaking and collaborating. So we make it a point to try to be a part of those events, because we find them to be really important. Again, thanks for joining us in the Chief Architect Network, where we're maximizing the value of architecture practices through our network to widen perspectives, share best practices, grow as leaders, develop talent, and drive outcomes. If you or someone you know is leading 10 or more architects in their organization, or acting as the senior most architect for a billion scale in revenue organization, have them apply to join us at chiefarchitectnetwork.com. Or if you're simply interested in what chief architects and architect thought leaders are sharing, follow us on LinkedIn. Chief Architect Network is all you have to look for. Thanks again for a great conversation. Pardon for some AV issues, but if you were listening to the audio, it was amazing. Rameshwar, Randy, Anthony, and Martin, great job on the panel. And that's Can Live signing off. Thanks, everybody.